The burned. From orbit, the planet looked like a dying star, glowing orange and red as cities turned to ash. The war fleet hung above it like dark clouds, their 200 ships blocking out the sun. Inside the command vessel, Supreme Commander watched the destruction with cold eyes. His skin reflected the light from the tactical displays. 300 years of conquest had taught him patience. 300 years, and not a single defeat. "The last city has fallen," his officer reported. "Total time, 4 hours and 17 minutes. Nodded, the had been weak. They relied too much on energy shields and particle weapons. The ships simply adapted. Their biomechanical armor learned from each attack, growing stronger with every hit. By the second hour, weapons became useless. It always ended the same way. Every species they encountered made the same mistakes. They fought with predictable patterns. They used technology that could be analyzed and countered. They surrendered when defeat became obvious. 47 species conquered, 47 worlds added to the Dominion, 0 defeats. "What is our next target?" asked. The tactical officer pulled up a star map. "The outer colonies of the Human Federation. Intelligence suggests they are technologically inferior. Fragmented government, no unified military. The closest target is a mining colony called New. Population, 200,000. Defense, minimal." Studied the data. Humans. He had heard of them but knew little. They were a young species, barely reaching beyond their home system 50 years ago. Their ships were crude. Their weapons were simple kinetic projectiles and basic missiles, nothing that could threaten the Dominion. "How many ships do they have at this colony?" he asked. "One, Commander. A mid-sized cruiser called the Defiant Dawn." Almost laughed. One ship to protect 200,000 civilians. These humans either had no understanding of warfare or they were already preparing to flee. "Send a forward battle group. 15 ships should be sufficient. Offer standard surrender terms. If they refuse, destroy their ship and occupy the colony." The officer saluted and left. Returned to his reports, already dismissing humanity as another minor obstacle. Across the galaxy, in a small office on New, Admiral sat at his desk reading the same intelligence reports. His weathered face showed no emotion, but his hands gripped the edge of the desk tightly. 52 years old, 30 years in the colonial defense fleet. He had fought pirates, smugglers, and rival corporations, but never anything like this. The reports from space were horrifying, an entire civilization gone in hours. "Admiral," Captain entered the room. She was younger, in her 30s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "The Federation Council has sent new orders. We're to evacuate New immediately." Looked up. "Evacuate? How long will that take?" "With our current transport capacity, at least 3 days to move everyone safely." "And how long until they arrive?" His expression darkened. 2 days, maybe less. Stood and walked to the window. Below he could see the colony's main city, families going about their daily lives, children playing in the streets, workers heading to the mines. None of them knew what was coming. "We can't evacuate everyone in time," he said quietly. "I know," replied. "Most colonies are choosing to run, leave everything behind and hope they don't follow. And abandon 200,000 people. The alternative is staying and dying, one ship against their fleet. We wouldn't last an hour." Turned to face her. "Captain, how long have we served together?" 7 years, sir." "In those 7 years, have you ever known me to run from a fight?" Smiled slightly. "No, Admiral, I haven't." "Then prepare the ship. We're staying." Down in the engineering bay of the Defiant Dawn, Chief Engineer was already preparing. He was a short man with grease-stained hands and a mind that never stopped working. Around him, his crew moved with practiced efficiency. "Sir, if we're really staying to fight, we need to upgrade everything," his assistant said nervously. Laughed. "Upgrade? With what?" We're a mining colony ship, not a battleship. We have basic weapons and standard hull armor. Then how do we fight ships that adapt to everything? Thought for a moment, then grinned. We don't try to be better than them. We try to be different. Get me all the mining explosives from the colony, and every piece of scrap metal we can find. His assistant looked confused. Sir, just do it, and someone find me the colony's industrial foam reserves. Across the ship, other crew members prepared in their own ways. Weapons officer ran simulations on the firing range, his hands steady as he practiced targeting patterns. Lieutenant gathered his Marines and began setting up defensive positions inside the ship's corridors. Specialist monitored space for any signs of the approaching fleet. In the colony below, Commander organized the evacuation efforts. He was a logistics expert, good at moving supplies and people efficiently, but even he knew they couldn't evacuate everyone in time. Focus on the children and elderly first, he ordered. Get them on the transports. A civilian approached him. Her name was, and she ran the colony's medical center. Commander, what about those of us who stay behind? Looked at her. What do you mean? Not everyone will fit on the transports. Some of us will have to stay. What's the plan for us? Didn't have an answer. The Federation orders were clear: evacuate and retreat. There was no plan for defending the colony on the ground. I don't know, he admitted. Nodded slowly. Then we'll make our own plan. The miners know these tunnels better than anyone. The factories can be converted. We won't just sit here waiting to die. Back on the Defiant Dawn, Admiral sat in his command chair on the bridge. The ship hummed around him, alive with activity. He could hear shouting orders and engineering. He could see coordinating with the evacuation fleet. He could feel the determination of his crew. His communications officer spoke up. Admiral, we're receiving a long-range transmission. It's from the fleet. Put it through. The screen showed a skinned alien with cold, dark eyes. Human vessel, the alien said in perfect English. You are in possession of territory that will be absorbed into the Dominion. You have one rotation of your planet to evacuate. After that, any remaining presence will be destroyed. This is not a negotiation. Stood up, his crew watched him, waiting to see what he would do. This is Admiral of the Human Federation ship Defiant Dawn. You are ordered to turn back immediately. This colony is under our protection. His expression didn't change. You have one ship. We have 15 in the forward group alone. Compliance is your only option. His voice was steady. Then you're about to learn something about humans. We don't back down, not today, not ever. Turn back now. This is your only warning. For a moment there was silence, then smiled slightly. We accept your challenge. May your death be swift. The transmission ended, looked at her Admiral. Sir, they'll be here in 30 hours. Sat back down. Then we have 30 hours to get ready. Tell to work faster. Tell to get creative with his targeting. Tell the crew that we're about to make history. What kind of history, sir? The kind where one ship holds the line against an empire. The kind where humanity shows the galaxy who we really are. Smiled. I'll pass the word, Admiral. As the crew prepared for battle, Admiral stared at the star map. Somewhere out there, 15 enemy ships were coming. Behind him, 200,000 civilians depended on him. He had no illusions. They would probably die. They had never lost. Every species that fought them was conquered. But had one advantage they didn't understand. Humans weren't like other species. Humans didn't fight because they expected to win. They fought because giving up was impossible. They were about to learn that lesson the hard way. The forward battle group arrived exactly when predicted. 15 warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their dark hulls gleaming like polished stone. Each ship was twice the size of the Defiant Dawn, equipped with weapons that had destroyed countless worlds. On the lead ship's bridge, Commander studied his display. The human vessel sat alone near the mining colony, not even attempting to hide. It looked old, with mismatched hull plates and jury-rigged external components. Primitive. "Scan the human ship," he ordered. His tactical officer worked quickly. Basic kinetic weapons, conventional missiles, standard fusion reactor. Hull composition appears to be simple metal alloys. No energy shields detected. Nodded, no shields at all. How do they defend against plasma weapons? Unknown, Commander. Perhaps they simply haven't encountered them before. It made sense. These humans were isolated, fighting only among themselves. They had no experience with real warfare. Almost felt sorry for them. Broadcast standard terms. Give them a chance to surrender. The message went out. Expected immediate compliance. Most species chose life over pointless death. Only the truly primitive ones refused. The human response came quickly. 3 missiles launched from the defiant dawn, streaking toward the formation. Laughed. They're actually fighting, pathetic. Let the missiles approach, show them how useless their weapons are. The missiles closed in. Just before impact, the ship's adaptive armor activated. Biomechanical skin analyzed the missile's composition and energy signature. Within seconds, the armor restructured itself to absorb the explosions completely. The missiles hit and vanished in small flashes, causing 0 damage. As expected, said, "Return fire. Disable their engines but leave the hull intact. We'll board and capture their command crew." 3 ships fired plasma beams. The green energy bolts crossed the distance in seconds, slamming into the defiant Dawn's hull. On the human ship's bridge, alarms blared. Admiral gripped his chair as the ship shook violently. "Damage report," he shouted. His voice came through the intercom from engineering. "Hull armor holding. The foam layer is absorbing most of the energy." Allowed himself a small smile. It worked. Captain looked at her console in amazement. "Sir, their plasma weapons are being dispersed across the entire hull surface. Its foam coating is spreading the heat like water." "It's not fancy," his voice continued. "Just industrial foam mixed with heat-resistant gel. We use it in the mines to protect against thermal vents. Turns out it works great against energy weapons, too." Nodded. "Target their forward ships. Use the rail guns." Weapons officer's hands moved across his controls. Rail guns charging, targeting their lead vessel. On the ship, watched in confusion as the human vessel survived multiple direct hits. His adaptive armor should have learned to penetrate any defense by now. But how could you adapt to something that just spread the damage around instead of blocking it? "Increase power, double the plasma intensity," he ordered. Before his ships could fire again, the defiant Dawn attacked, but not with missiles this time. Solid metal projectiles launched from the human ship at incredible speed. Simple iron rods accelerated by magnetic rails. No explosives, no energy signatures, just mass and velocity. The armor tried to adapt, but there was nothing to adapt to. The projectiles were too simple, too basic. They punched straight through the biomechanical hull like paper. The lead ship shuddered as 3 rail gun rounds tore through its port side. Atmosphere vented into space. Internal explosions rippled along the hull. Stared in shock. How our armor should have. "It adapted to energy weapons and explosives," his tactical officer interrupted. "But these are just solid metal, high-velocity impacts. There's nothing to adapt to." Watch the ship drift, damaged and venting gas. "Reload, target the next ship." "Sir," said, 3 of their ships are breaking formation. They're moving to board us." "Let them come. Lieutenant, are your Marines ready?" Down in the ship's corridors, Lieutenant checked his rifle one last time. Around him, 30 Marines waited in hidden positions. The corridors had been transformed into a maze of barricades, false walls, and concealed firing positions. "Remember," said calmly, They're bigger and stronger, don't fight fair, use the traps. The boarding craft attached to the Defiant Dawn's hull with heavy thuds. Cutting lasers burned through the airlock doors. 50 warriors poured into the ship, each one standing 7 feet tall with skin and powerful builds. They moved through the corridors confidently. Their species had boarded thousands of ships. Resistance was always brief. They reached the first intersection and stopped. The corridor ahead was empty, too empty. The lead warrior took one more step. The floor exploded beneath him, not from exotic weapons or energy mines, but from simple explosives packed into a false floor panel. 5 warriors were killed instantly. The others fell back, startled. Before they could regroup, gunfire erupted from hidden positions in the walls. The Marines had cut firing holes in the bulkheads, creating kill zones that gave them perfect cover. The warriors were strong, but they were designed for honorable combat, ship-to-ship battles with clear lines. They weren't prepared for humans who hid in walls, used traps, and refused to fight fairly. "Fall back," the leader shouted. But falling back meant walking through the corridor they just cleared. Marines had already sealed the path behind them with welded doors. Lieutenant watched from his hidden position as the warriors realized they were trapped. "Now," he said quietly into his radio. The corridor's oxygen supply was cut off and replaced with a mixture of smoke and tear gas. Not lethal, but disorienting. In the confusion, Marines dropped from ceiling panels, attacking from above. The fight was brutal and short. When it ended, 40 warriors were dead or captured. Only 10 escaped back to their boarding craft. On the bridge, Admiral received the report. "Lieutenant says the boarding attempt failed. Minimal casualties on our side." Captain checked her display. "Sir, the fleet is pulling back. They're regrouping at longer range." Nodded. "They're confused. We're not fighting like they expected. Hit them again while they're disorganized." The Defiant Dawn fired another salvo of rail gun rounds. 2 more ships took damage, their adaptive armor useless against simple kinetic weapons. On his command ship, watched his formation fall apart. 3 ships severely damaged, 1 boarding party nearly wiped out, and that 1 human ship still fought on. "Withdraw," he ordered quietly. "Pull back to defensive range." His officers stared at him. "Commander, we still outnumber them." "I said withdraw." His voice was sharp. "We need to report this to Supreme Commander. These humans, they don't fight like any species we've encountered." The fleet pulled back, leaving a shocked silence in their wake. On the Defiant Dawn, the crew erupted in cheers. They had held off 15 ships. They had survived. But Admiral didn't celebrate. He knew this was just the beginning. They would return with more ships, more weapons, and next time they would be ready for human tricks. Captain approached him quietly. "Sir, we did it. We actually held them off." "For now," said, "but they'll analyze everything we did. They'll adapt, and they'll come back angrier." "How long do we have?" "Days, maybe a week if we're lucky. The evacuation needs to move faster." Nodded. "I'll coordinate with Commander. We'll work around the clock." As she left, stared at the tactical display. Somewhere beyond sensor range, the fleet was regrouping, and somewhere beyond that, their main fleet was preparing to move. The battle was won, but the war was just beginning. And for the first time in 300 years, the Empire had tasted defeat. They would not forget it, and they would not forgive it. Took a deep breath. His crew had fought brilliantly. They had used every advantage, every trick, every ounce of human creativity, and it had worked. But could they do it again, against 50 ships, against 100? He didn't know, but he knew they would try, because that's what humans did. They fought even when victory seemed impossible. They stood their ground even when retreat was the logical choice. The galaxy was about to learn what that meant. 5 days after the first battle, the main fleet arrived. 50 warships emerged from hyperspace in a perfect sphere formation, completely surrounding the Defiant Dawn. They were larger than the forward group, their hulls covered in weapons that could tear planets apart. On his flagship, Supreme Commander studied the human vessel through his displays. It looked worse now, with burn marks across the hull and temporary patches covering damaged sections. One ship against 50. The humans should have run. "Why do they stay?" he asked his officers. "Unknown, Commander. Perhaps they are simply too primitive to understand their situation." "Didn't think so. Primitive species ran when facing overwhelming force. These humans had already proven they understood warfare. They had used clever tactics to defeat his forward group. So why stay?" "Open a channel," he ordered. "I want to speak to their commander." On the Defiant Dawn's bridge, Admiral accepted the communication. The alien face that appeared on his screen was cold and calculating. "I am Supreme Commander," the alien said. "I have studied your previous battle. Your tactics were creative. Your courage is noted, but you cannot win this fight. 50 ships surround you. Surrender now, and I will allow your civilians to evacuate peacefully. Stood up, and if we refuse, then I will destroy your colony from orbit, every building, every mine, every person. I do not wish to do this, but I will." Behind, Captain worked quickly at her console. Specialist had detected something interesting in the transmissions. They were broadcasting their positions to each other constantly, maintaining perfect formation. It was efficient, but it also meant their ships were networked together. Admiral whispered, "Has an idea." Kept his eyes on. "You've conquered 47 species. You've never lost a battle, but you've also never fought humans before. We have something you don't understand." "And what is that?" "We know when to fight and when to show the galaxy who we really are. You want new, come and take it." Cut the transmission, stared at the blank screen for a moment, then smiled slightly. These humans were interesting. Foolish, but interesting. "Begin the attack. Target their weapons first. I want them disabled, not destroyed. We'll board them and learn their secrets." The fleet opened fire. 50 ships unleashed a storm of plasma bolts, kinetic rounds, and energy beams. The space around the Defiant Dawn lit up like a sun. The human ship rocked under the assault. Explosions tore through the hull. Deck 3 lost pressure. Deck 4 was completely destroyed. Deck 7 caught fire. In engineering, held on as the ship shook violently around him. "Reroute power from life support to the foam layers. We need more heat absorption." "Sir, we're losing hull integrity on the port side." "Then seal it off. Use the cargo bay doors as emergency patches." "That's not what they're designed for." "I don't care what they're designed for. Make it work." On the bridge, Admiral watched his ship fall apart. Systems were failing faster than they could be repaired. The main reactor was at 40% power. Weapons were offline. They were dying. "Casualty reports coming in," said quietly. 63 dead, over 100 wounded. His face was grim. "Can we still fight?" "Barely. We have one working railgun and maybe 10 missiles." "Then we use them. I need you to target something specific." Weapons officer wiped blood from a cut on his forehead. "What target, sir?" "Their flagship, the one broadcasting to all the others, detected their network signals. If we can disable their command ship, maybe we can disrupt their coordination." It was a desperate plan. One damaged rail gun against a flagship specifically designed to withstand attacks, but desperate was all they had left. Lined up his shot, compensating for the Defiant Dawn's listing and the multiple system failures. His hands were steady despite the chaos around him. Target locked. Firing. The railgun fired 3 rounds in quick succession. Simple iron rods, launched at incredible speed. They crossed the distance in seconds and slammed into his flagship. The first round penetrated the hull. The second hit their main communication array. The third struck their power distribution network. On the flagship, lights flickered. systems went offline, and most importantly, the network coordination signal stopped broadcasting. Across the fleet, ships suddenly found themselves without centralized commands. Captains had to make their own decisions. Formation patterns broke down. Some ships continued firing while others held position, waiting for orders. "Exploit the confusion," shouted. "Fire everything we have left." The Defiant Dawn launched its remaining missiles, not at the ships themselves but at the space between them. The missiles exploded, creating clouds of shrapnel and sensor interference. Down on Nu, Commander watched the battle from the colony's command center. They had sent landing craft to the surface, trying to secure the evacuation points, but they hadn't counted on civilian resistance. Had organized the miners and factory workers into defensive groups. When the soldiers landed near the spaceport, they were met with mining explosives and improvised weapons. "They're trying to flank us from the east," someone shouted. "Collapse Tunnel 7, ordered calmly. "That'll slow them down." The soldiers were better trained and better equipped, but the humans knew the terrain. Every street was a potential ambush. Every building could be rigged to explode. The aliens had never faced an entire population willing to fight. Back in space, the battle continued. The Defiant Dawn was barely functional now. Half the ship was destroyed or vented to space. Life support was failing. The crew had sealed themselves into the bridge and engineering, the only sections still pressurized. "Admiral said quietly, 'We're done. No weapons, no engines. Life support will last maybe an hour.'" Looked around his bridge. His crew was exhausted, wounded, but still at their posts. They had fought harder than anyone thought possible, but it wasn't enough. "Then we have one option left," he said, "ramming speed." The crew stared at him. Captain understood first. "You want to ram the flagship. If we're going to die anyway, let's take their commander with us. Maybe it'll buy the colony more time." It was a suicide attack, but every person on the bridge nodded. They had come this far, they might as well finish it. Started diverting all remaining power to the engines. "This is going to burn out everything we have left. Once we start, we can't stop." "That's the idea," replied. "Prepare for final run, target the flagship." On the surface, Commander received a transmission from the Defiant Dawn. Admiral's face appeared on the screen, covered in smoke and blood. "Commander, we're out of options. We're going to try something desperate. If it works, it might buy you enough time to finish the evacuation. If it doesn't, it's been an honor serving with you." Felt his throat tighten. "Admiral, wait. Take care of the colonists. That's an order. Out." The transmission ended. Stared at the blank screen, knowing what was about to happen. In space, the Defiant Dawn's engines flared to life one last time. The battered ship began moving towards flagship, slowly at first, then faster. On the flagship, officers worked frantically to restore systems. When they saw the human ship approaching, they understood immediately. "They're attempting a ramming attack," an officer shouted. "Evasive maneuvers." But the flagship's engines were still offline from the rail gun damage. It couldn't move fast enough. Watched the approaching ship with something like respect. These humans refused to die quietly. Even in their final moments, they attacked. The Defiant Dawn was seconds away from impact when something unexpected happened. 30 new signatures appeared on every sensor in the system. Ships dropping out of hyperspace all around the battlefield. Human ships. The Federation's third fleet had arrived. Admiral stared at his display in shock. "Cancel the ramming run. Full reverse." The Defiant Dawn's engine screamed as reversed the thrust at the last second. The ship shuddered, but stopped just short of collision. The new fleet was fresh and fully armed. 30 warships against the damaged fleet. And they didn't fight like anyone expected. No formations, no coordinated attacks. Every ship acted independently, adapting in real time to the battle. When weapons proved effective, human ships switched tactics instantly. Some rammed, some launched explosive shuttles, some used planets and asteroids as cover. For the first time in 300 years, the fleet broke formation and retreated, not because they were defeated, but because they finally understood what they were fighting. An enemy that couldn't be predicted, an enemy that refused to die, an enemy that would sacrifice everything rather than surrender. As the ships fled into hyperspace, the Third Fleet's admiral contacted. "Admiral, this is Admiral. Sorry we're late. Looks like you saved the day without us." Slumped in his chair, exhausted. "Just glad you showed up. We were out of ideas." Around him, his crew collapsed at their stations, too tired even to celebrate. They had survived. Against impossible odds, they had survived. And the Empire had learned a lesson they would never forget. The Defiant Dawn limped back to New 3 days after the battle. The ship was barely recognizable. 70% of the hull was destroyed or damaged beyond repair. 300 crew members had died, leaving only 100 survivors. Admiral stood on the bridge watching the colony approach. His arm was in a sling. Burns covered half his face, but he was alive and so was his ship. "Permission to dock," the spaceport controller said over the radio. There was emotion in her voice. Everyone on the colony had watched the battle. They knew what the Defiant Dawn had done for them. "Permission granted," replied. "It's good to be home." The ship touched down on the main landing pad. Despite evacuation orders, thousands of colonists had stayed to watch. When the airlock opened and walked out, they erupted in cheers. Commander was waiting at the bottom of the ramp. He saluted sharply. "Welcome back, Admiral. The colony stands because you stood." Returned the salute tiredly. "We all stood together, Commander. Your people fought just as hard on the ground." Pushed through the crowd, her medical team behind her. "Admiral, you need immediate treatment. That burn looks infected." "Later. First, I need to see the casualty lists. I need to know who we lost." The lists were long. 289 crew members dead, 53 colonists killed in the ground fighting, hundreds more injured. The cost of survival had been high. In the ship's ruined mess hall, the surviving crew gathered. They were dirty, wounded, and exhausted, but they were alive. Captain stood and raised a cup. To those who didn't make it, they held the line. "They held the line," the crew repeated. Sat in the corner, staring at his hands. He had kept the ship running through impossible conditions, but it hadn't been enough to save everyone. 3 of his engineering crew had died when Deck 4 was destroyed. Lieutenant sat next to him. The Marine officer had lost 5 of his people in the boarding action. "You did everything you could," he said quietly. "Wasn't enough." "Never is, but we're still here. They gave us that." Across the colony, similar scenes played out. Families mourning losses, workers repairing damage, medics treating the wounded. Life continued, but it was changed. Everyone knew how close they had come to extinction. Far across the galaxy, in the heart of the Dominion, Supreme Commander stood before the ruling council. The massive chamber was filled with the Empire's highest leaders. They wanted answers. "You retreated," the High Chancellor said coldly. "For the first time in 300 years, a fleet from battle." "Yes," replied calmly. "I ordered the withdrawal." "Why, you had 50 ships. They had 1 damaged vessel." "Because I realized we were not fighting a battle we could win." Brought up tactical displays. "The humans don't fight like other species. They don't rely on technology we can adapt to. They use simple weapons that our armor cannot counter. They employ unpredictable tactics. They refuse to surrender even when defeat is certain. So they are strong. We have faced strong species before." "No," said firmly. "You don't understand. Strength is not the problem. They were strong. They were strong. We conquered them because they fought rationally. They knew when they were beaten. Humans don't." He pulled up recordings from the battle. Images of the Defiant Dawn, burning and broken, still firing at the fleet. Images of civilian miners attacking trained soldiers with improvised weapons. Images of wounded crew members staying at their posts even as their ship fell apart around them. "Look at this," said. "That human ship should have been destroyed in the first hour. Their admiral should have surrendered to save his crew. Instead, they fought for days. And when we thought victory was certain, they prepared to ram us. A suicide attack with zero chance of survival." The council members watched in silence. "They value individual lives," continued, "but they sacrifice without hesitation. They are technologically inferior, but they innovate constantly. They have no unified military doctrine, which makes them impossible to predict. Every ship fights differently. Every soldier makes independent decisions." "Are you saying we cannot defeat them?" the High Chancellor asked. "I'm saying the cost would be unacceptable. To truly conquer humanity, we would need to hunt down every ship, every colony, every human in the galaxy, and they would fight us every step of the way. Not because they believe they can win, but because surrender is not in their nature." Transmitted a report to the Council. "I estimate it would take 20 years and cost us half our fleet to fully subjugate humanity, and even then, human resistance would continue indefinitely." The chamber fell silent. The council members read the report carefully. Some looked skeptical, others looked concerned. Finally, the High Chancellor spoke. "What do you recommend?" "Avoid human space entirely. Mark their territory as forbidden. Inform all fleet commanders that engagement with human forces is not authorized without council approval." "You want us to fear them?" "No," said quietly. "I want us to respect them. There is a difference. Fear is what primitives feel. Respect is what equals give to each other." The council debated for hours. Some argued for immediate revenge. Others agreed with secession. In the end, the High Chancellor made the decision. "The Dominion will not pursue conflict with humanity at this time. We will observe them, study them, and if necessary treat them as equals." The word tasted strange in their mouths. Equals. After 300 years of conquest, they were acknowledging that another species matched them. Back on New, Admiral didn't know about the Council's decision. He was focused on rebuilding. The Defiant Dawn would never fly again. The damage was too extensive, but the crew was alive and that mattered more. He visited the medical center where the wounded were recovering. Had lost his left hand in an explosion, but was already asking when he could return to duty. Specialist had a concussion, but was still monitoring communication frequencies. Was being treated for radiation exposure, but refused to rest. Admiral called out weakly, "I've been tracking movements. Their fleet has withdrawn completely. They're not just falling back. They're leaving this entire sector." Sat down next to her bed. "What does that mean?" "I think it means they're not coming back, at least not soon." Outside the medical center, found Captain standing at a memorial wall. Names of the dead were being carved into stone. So many names. "We won," said quietly, "but it doesn't feel like victory." "No," agreed. "Victory never does when you count the cost." "Was it worth it?" Looked around at the colony. Children playing in the streets again. Miners returning to work. Families rebuilding their homes. Life continuing despite everything. "Ask me in 20 years," he said. "When these children are grown and the galaxy is different because we stood here and said no, then maybe we'll know if it was worth it." News of the Battle of New spread across known space faster than anyone expected. The 47 conquered species of the Dominion heard that someone had finally stood against their conquerors and survived. Resistance movements began forming on occupied worlds. Other alien species, previously neutral, approached humanity with diplomatic proposals. Some wanted alliance. Others wanted trade. Many simply wanted to understand these strange beings who refused to be conquered. The Human Federation, previously a minor power barely noticed by the galaxy, suddenly found itself respected, feared by some, admired by others, but no longer ignored. And on the ruins of a single mining colony, a memorial was built. It showed the defiant dawn, damaged but still flying. Beneath it, simple words. They came for conquest, they found defiance. Admiral attended the memorial's dedication ceremony. Thousands of people gathered to honor the dead. When asked to speak, he kept it brief. We didn't fight because we were brave. We fought because we had no choice. We didn't win because we were strong. We survived because we refused to quit. That's what humanity is. That's what will always be. As he finished speaking, a message arrived from Federation High Command. He was promoted to Fleet Admiral and given command of Earth's defense forces. The Defiant Dawn's crew would be spread across the fleet, teaching others their tactics and methods. The galaxy had changed, and humanity, for better or worse, had announced its presence to the stars. 5 years had passed since the Battle of Nu. The mining colony had been rebuilt, bigger and stronger than before. Where the old spaceport once stood, a massive now orbited the planet, and at its center, preserved as a monument, was the wreckage of the original Defiant Dawn. Fleet Admiral stood in his office overlooking the construction. He was 57 now, his hair completely. The burns on his face had healed, leaving permanent scars that he wore without shame. Every officer in the fleet knew those scars and what they represented. Admiral Captain entered. She was a captain of her own ship now, commanding the Defiant Dawn II. The diplomatic delegation from the Resistance has arrived. They're asking to meet with you. Nodded, send them in. 3 refugees entered his office. There had been conquered by the 5 years ago, but they had never stopped fighting. When news of Nu spread, their resistance movement gained new hope. Fleet Admiral, their leader said, bowing slightly, we come seeking your guidance. Our people wish to liberate our world, but we lack the strength to face the directly. Gestured for them to sit. I'm not sure what help I can offer. We barely survived one battle with a single ship. But you survived, and more importantly, you made them retreat. In 300 years, no one had done that. We need to understand how. Thought carefully before answering. We didn't win through strength. We won because they didn't understand us. They expected us to fight like everyone else. When we didn't, it confused them enough to create an opening. Can you teach us your methods? I can teach you what we did, but you'll need to adapt it to your own strengths. Humans fight the way we do because it matches our nature. You need to find what matches yours. Over the next weeks, similar delegations arrived from across the galaxy, species that had been conquered or threatened by They all wanted the same thing, to learn how to resist. Worked with them all, but he was careful. He didn't want to create copies of human tactics. Instead, he taught principles: unpredictability, asymmetric warfare, psychological pressure, and the importance of never giving up. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Dominion was changing. Supreme Commander had been studying humanity obsessively for 5 years. His office was filled with human history, human military doctrine, human philosophy. His second-in-command found him reading about something called the Alamo. What is that, Commander? She asked. A battle from human history. 189 soldiers held a fortress against thousands of enemy troops. They all died, but their sacrifice inspired their people to victory in the larger war. They celebrate defeat. No, they celebrate defiance. Humans have dozens of these stories: Thermopylae, Drift, Wake Island. Every culture in their history has moments where a few held against many, knowing they would die but fighting anyway. Why would they do that? Close the book. Because to humans, how you die matters as much as whether you win. They believe some things are worth dying for, and that belief makes them dangerous. The military had restructured completely. No longer did they rely on overwhelming force and adaptive technology. Now they trained for asymmetric warfare. They studied unpredictable tactics. They prepared for enemies who fought like humans. But they also avoided human space entirely. The cost was too high, the risk too great. On Nu, life had transformed. The mining colony had become a symbol of resistance across the galaxy. Refugees from dozens of worlds came there seeking shelter. The population had grown from 200,000 to over 1 million. Commander, now governor of the colony, managed the growth carefully. Had become the colony's chief medical officer, treating refugees from species humans had never even encountered before. "It's strange," said one evening, watching alien children play in the streets. "5 years ago we were nobody. Now we're a beacon of hope for half the galaxy." Nodded. "Sometimes I wonder if that's too much responsibility." "It is, but we carry it anyway. That's what Nu means now." In Earth's orbit, the Federation Defense Fleet had grown to over 200 ships. Many were commanded by veterans of the Defiant Dawn, designed new vessels that combined human innovation with alien technology. Lieutenant, now Colonel, trained Marine units in unconventional warfare. Despite losing his hand, continued serving as a weapons instructor. He had learned to shoot left-handed and was better than ever. Specialist headed the fleet's intelligence division, monitoring threats across known space. But the greatest change was political. The Human Federation had formed the Coalition of Free Worlds, an alliance of species who refused to be conquered. 37 species had joined, including several former subjects who had successfully liberated themselves. The coalition's charter was simple: mutual defense, free trade, and the right of all species to self-determination. No member could be forced to fight, but all agreed to help defend each other. It wasn't an empire. It was something new, a voluntary alliance based on shared values rather than conquest. Fleet Admiral addressed the coalition's first assembly. Representatives from 37 worlds gathered in the Great Hall on Earth. Some were humanoid, others were completely alien, but all were united by one experience. They had stood against tyranny and survived. 5 years ago, began, one human ship held the line against impossible odds. We didn't fight for conquest. We didn't fight for resources. We fought because we believed freedom was worth defending. Today, that belief has grown into this coalition. We are not the strongest alliance. We are not the largest. But we are united by something more powerful than military might: the refusal to surrender our liberty. The assembly erupted in approval. Species who had never met before, who had nothing in common except their desire for independence, found themselves united. In the Dominion watched the broadcast with interest. His empire was still vast, still powerful, but it was no longer expanding. For the first time in 300 years, they had found a boundary they chose not to cross. He sent one final encrypted message to Fleet Admiral. It was brief. "You have taught the galaxy something we had forgotten, that the will to be free is stronger than the desire to conquer. The Dominion acknowledges the coalition of free worlds as sovereign territory. We will not cross your borders, but know that we are watching. You have earned our respect, Admiral. Few species can claim that." Read the message and allowed himself a small smile. It wasn't a treaty. It wasn't even a formal agreement. But it was something: acknowledgement that humanity and its allies had the right to exist unmolested. That night, returned to Nu for the first time in months. He visited the memorial where the Defiant Dawn's wreckage was preserved. The names of the dead were carved into the monument's base. 289 names. 289 people who gave everything. Captain found him there. "Sir, the fleet is ready for tomorrow's ceremony. The new ships are being commissioned." "Good, how many?" 12 new vessels, all named after colonies that stood against the. Nodded, and the Defiant Dawn, how is she? Smiled, "She's ready for anything, just like her predecessor." They stood together in silence, looking at the monument, finally spoke. Do you think they knew, the crew who died here, do you think they knew what their sacrifice would mean? I think they knew they were fighting for something bigger than themselves. That's all that mattered. Placed his hand on the cold metal of the wreckage. We held the line here, one ship against an empire, and somehow we changed the galaxy. Yes, sir, we did. As the sun set over New, the lights of the growing city spread across the landscape. Ships from dozens of worlds docked at the orbital station. Refugees found new homes. Children of different species played together in the streets. The galaxy had learned a lesson at New. It learned that conquest has a cost, that some beings cannot be broken, that freedom, once tasted, cannot be taken away without a fight. And it learned to respect humanity, not because humans were the strongest but because when one human ship faced impossible odds, it said no. That refusal, that single word spoken in defiance of an empire, had changed everything. They came for conquest, they found defiance, and in that defiance the galaxy found hope. Fleet Admiral looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there the watched, other threats waited. The universe was still dangerous. But humanity was no longer alone, and they would never back down. The memorial's inscription gleamed in the fading light. They conquered worlds effortlessly, until a human warship blocked their way. And beneath it, one final line. Here, the galaxy learned what it means to be human.